My father humiliated me at my own graduation party by raising a glass to my younger sister and saying he wished she was the one holding my nursing diploma. My mother nodded. My sister smiled. And everyone waited for me, Maren Voss, a 34-year-old registered nurse who had worked night shifts for 9 years and paid for every class myself, to swallow it like I always did. But 3 months later, at a county health fair I built from the ground up, her perfect good daughter story fell apart in front of the pharmacist, the church ladies, the contractor, my coworkers, and the parents who had spent years calling me absent. Chapter 1. The toast that didn't belong to me. On June 15, 2024, I stood in the backyard of my parents' farmhouse outside Staunton, Virginia, wearing a navy dress I had ironed at 6 that morning after a 12-hour night shift. My name was Maren Voss. I was 34 years old, a registered nurse at Blue Ridge County Memorial Hospital, and that afternoon was supposed to be my graduation party, not a high school graduation, not a pretty little milestone someone else had paid for. My BSN had taken 5 years of part-time classes, online lectures, overtime shifts, cold coffee, and falling asleep with pharmacology notes open on my kitchen table. I had done prerequisites at Valley Ridge Community College from 2019 to 2021, then finished the RN to BSN track through James Madison University while working 3 12-hour night shifts a week, plus whatever overtime the hospital needed when the floor was short. I had paid for it myself. Every textbook, every exam fee, every class I took, while my family told me I was always too busy, always tired, always somewhere else. That afternoon there were folding tables in the yard, paper plates stacked beside potato salad, barbecue smoking near the shed, pitchers of unsweetened iced tea sweating under the June heat, and a sheet cake with my graduation photo propped beside it. Some neighbors had come. A few church friends from Grace Baptist stood near the porch steps. My mother, Ruth Voss, had set out napkins with tiny gold stars on them because she said they were festive. For a while, I let myself believe she meant festive for me. My father, Caleb Voss, stood near the long table with a plastic champagne flute in his hand. He was 63, broad-shouldered, sunburned across the back of his neck, with the same rough hands he had carried home from Valley Weave Textiles for more than 30 years before the plant closed in 2018. Since then, he had done odd jobs around Augusta County, fixing porch steps, mailboxes, gutters, fences, whatever someone would pay him cash to handle. He believed in work you could see under your fingernails. He believed a man was honest if his back hurt at the end of the day. He had never known what to do with my kind of work. He respected blood when it came from a split knuckle, not when it came through an IV line. He respected exhaustion if it smelled like sawdust, not antiseptic. Still, when he tapped his fork against his glass, I straightened. I thought for one foolish second that my father was about to say he was proud of me. He did not look at me. He looked past me, toward my younger sister, Brielle Mercer. Brielle was 30. With glossy brown hair she kept curled even for backyard cookouts, a white sundress, and a smile that always looked soft until you were the person it was cutting. She worked at a salon in Waynesboro and lived 8 minutes from my parents with her husband, Travis, and their 2 children, Ainsley and Owen. Travis was a plumber when he had a crew and unemployed when he did not. That day he stood beside Brielle with a beer can in one hand, pretending the grass needed his attention. My father raised his glass toward my sister and said he wished it was Brielle holding that diploma. The yard changed shape around me. Not loudly. Nothing dramatic happened. No plate shattered. No one gasped the way people do in movies. The first sound I noticed was the ice shifting in a pitcher of tea. Then someone gave a nervous little laugh, like the kind people use when they are waiting for the person who has been hurt to make it easier for everyone else. My mother did not correct him. Ruth Voss, 59, part-time thrift shop volunteer at Grace Baptist, the woman who cried during insurance commercials and knitted baby blankets for church raffles, nodded like my father had said something tender. Like he had turned my graduation into a compliment, Brielle looked down at her lap and smiled. That was the part that told me it had not surprised her. I looked at the cake. My photo was leaning beside it in a cheap black frame. I was wearing my cap and gown in that picture, trying not to look exhausted, trying to look like a woman who had finally done something even her family would have to see. Behind that photo, the buttercream had begun to soften in the heat. I set my napkin on the table. I did not scream. I did not throw my glass. I did not say the 100 things that rose in my throat and burned there. I stood up, walked across the yard, and stepped onto the side porch. The screen door closed behind me with a soft clap, and the party kept breathing without me. That was the thing about being invisible. People did not stop when you left. They adjusted around the empty space as if it had always belonged there. I stood on the porch looking out toward the gravel driveway, smelling barbecue smoke and cut grass, listening to my father's friends clear their throats, and my mother begin talking too brightly about cake. My diploma was still inside. My photograph was still beside it. But the moment was no longer mine. A minute later, the door opened. Jenna Whitfield stepped out beside me. Jenna was 36, a night shift nurse like me, and the only person in that yard who knew how many times I had studied medication interactions at 3 in the morning between call lights. She had quizzed me on pharmacology while we ate vending machine pretzels in the break room. She had covered my patients for 10 minutes when I needed to cry in the supply closet after failing a practice exam. She knew the degree inside that house had not been handed to me. It had been dragged across 5 years of sleep deprivation and paid for in hours my family never counted. Jenna leaned against the porch rail and said that was the worst toast she had ever heard. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. I told her I was done. She looked at me carefully. Done with what? I stared through the porch screen at the people in the yard. My mother was cutting the cake now. Brielle stood near her, one hand on Ainsley's shoulder, already back inside the warm circle of being seen. My father was talking to a neighbor like nothing had happened. I told Jenna I was done pretending words did not hurt, just because my family wrapped them in a prayer before dinner. I was done letting Brielle tell the story first, and then acting confused when everyone believed her version. I was done being useful in the dark while someone else stood under the porch light. I was still a nurse. I would still do the right thing when someone's health or safety was on the line. I was not going to become cruel just because my family had made cruelty look ordinary. But I was finished erasing myself. Jenna did not smile. She just nodded, the way nurses nod when a patient finally says where the pain really is. That night, after I drove back to my rental house 25 minutes away, after I hung my dress over a chair instead of putting it away, after I sat on my small porch swing and listened to the cicadas grind their song into the dark, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. She wrote that my father did not mean it that way. I stared at those words for a long time. For most of my life, I would have answered fast. I would have said I understood. I would have said I was tired, too sensitive, no big deal. I would have made my own wound smaller so my mother would not have to feel guilty standing near it. That night, I typed back that he could explain what he meant when he was ready to say it to me, not through her. Then I put the phone face down. It was the first time I could remember not cleaning up a mess someone else had made in my chest. Brielle lived close enough to my parents that she could drop in with the kids before Ruth finished her morning coffee. She was in my mother's kitchen, at the church thrift shop, in Facebook photos, at Sunday dinners, at every little moment that could be seen and praised. Ainsley was 6, Owen was 4, and my mother believed the sound of their shoes on her linoleum was proof of loyalty. I lived near the hospital, in a small rental with a porch swing that squeaked when the weather changed. I missed Sunday dinners because people coded at shift change, because night shift wrecked time, because patients did not stop needing insulin or blood pressure meds, just because my mother had made pot roast. But when something broke, when a bill confused them, when a prescription needed picking up, when my father's back went out or my mother's cough lingered too long, my phone rang. Brielle was the daughter they photographed. I was the daughter they called when something was already falling apart. Later that same night, Brielle texted me. She said, "Dad was just emotional and I should not make graduation weird." I held the phone in my hand and felt something inside me go very still. Before, I would have explained. I would have softened my reply until she could pretend she had not meant anything by it. I would have apologized just to put the family back the way everyone liked it, with me quiet and Brielle comfortable. Instead, I took a screenshot, then I said nothing. I did not know yet that 3 months later, screenshots, receipts, invoices, pharmacy records, and the things I had done in silence would be spoken out loud in front of people who knew my family, knew my work, and had believed Brielle's version for far too long. But I knew one thing that night. I was not going to disappear just because they had learned how to look past me. Chapter 2. The daughter who showed up for potost. Hard part was realizing the toast had not been an accident. It was not one bad sentence from a tired man with a drink in his hand. It was the first time my family had said out loud, in front of neighbors and church friends and a sheet cake with my face on it, what they had been teaching me quietly for years. In my mother's house, love was measured by who stood closest to her. Caleb measured worth by the kind of work he understood. Brielle understood both rules early, and she learned how to win inside them. She did not have to do the most. She only had to be photographed doing enough. A few months before my graduation, I had tried to make my mother's birthday special. I had come off a 12-hour night shift with my feet throbbing and my eyes burning from fluorescent lights. Instead of going home, I drove 40 minutes out of my way to Sullivan's Bakery in Staunton and bought a $45 cake with buttercream roses, the kind my mother always said tasted like weddings and church basements. It was not about the money. It was about showing up in the only way I could after spending the whole night answering call lights, checking blood pressures, and keeping two confused patients from pulling out their IVs. I remember sitting in the bakery parking lot with the cake box on the passenger seat, telling myself she would see it. This time, she would see the effort. By the time I got to her house, the kitchen was already cleaned. Brielle had hosted an early birthday breakfast at her place. She had put a candle in a grocery store cinnamon roll, taken 3 photos of Mom holding Owen in her lap, and posted them before I even turned onto my parents' road. The caption said, "Mom deserves daughters who show up." When I called from the driveway, my mother answered with that bright, careful voice she used when she already knew she had hurt me, but wanted me to pretend she had not. "Oh honey, we already did cake. Brielle had the kids up early and it just worked better. Maybe we can do yours another time." Another time never came. I ate 1 slice of that cake 2 nights later after work, standing barefoot in my own kitchen at 2 in the morning. The frosting had gone hard at the edges. I threw the rest away before trash pickup because looking at it made me feel foolish. Back then, I told myself Brielle had simply been faster. Later, I understood. She had not loved our mother more because she arrived first. She had learned that if she filled the frame before I got there, I would always look late. 2 weeks after the graduation party, I ran into her at the Food Lion on Route 250. I had stopped in after a hospital meeting, still wearing my scrub jacket, my hair pulled back too tightly, a grocery basket hanging from my elbow with coffee, eggs, and a rotisserie chicken I knew I would eat over the sink. Brielle was in the frozen aisle with a cart full of chicken nuggets, juice boxes, cereal bars, and the kind of snacks my mother always bought for Ainsley and Owen even when she said money was tight. Her hair was curled. Mine smelled faintly like sanitizer. She saw me and smiled like nothing had happened. "How's the new diploma?" New diploma. As if it were a purse. As if 5 years of online lectures, clinical papers, tuition payments, and night shift exhaustion had been something I picked up on sale. "It's fine," I said. She tilted her head. "You still mad about Dad?" "I'm not sure mad is the word." "Well, he was emotional. You know how he gets." I looked at her cart, then back at her. "Do I?" Her smile thinned, but she recovered fast. Brielle had always been good at stepping over a crack in the floor before anyone else noticed it. "Anyway, I actually needed to ask you something. Travis has a bachelor thing Saturday, and I promised the kids we'd do movie night, but Janet from church asked if I could help with the donation closet. Could you watch Ainsley and Owen for a few hours? I work Saturday." She rolled her eyes before I even finished. "You always say that." Something in me went very still, not hot, not loud, just still. "Because I usually am working," I said, "and because after what Dad said at my own graduation party, I'm not pretending everything is normal just so you can have a free Saturday." Her mouth opened a little, then tightened. "So now you're punishing my kids?" "No," I said. "I'm refusing to be your backup plan while you call me absent behind my back." For the first time in a long time, Brielle did not have an answer ready. A woman with a basket of bananas and paper towels slowed at the end of the aisle, pretending to read the price on frozen peas. Brielle noticed, of course. Her face changed immediately, softening into the injured look she wore when she wanted witnesses. "I don't know why you're being so ugly," she said quietly. "I'm not being ugly. I'm being clear." I walked away before she could turn my clarity into cruelty. In the parking lot, as I was unlocking my car, I heard her phone ring. She was close enough that I caught Travis's voice through the speaker before she lowered the volume. "Did you talk Maren into Saturday?" Brielle hissed something I could not make out, but I heard my name. I heard the irritation. I heard the surprise that the old button had not worked. I sat in my car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. My heart was beating hard, but not from fear, from the strange shock of not folding. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed the facts the way I would chart a patient. Food Lion. Brielle asked for babysitting. Said I always work. Boundary set. Nurses are trained to document what happened, not what we wish had happened. Time, place, symptoms, response. For years, I had charted everyone else's pain with accuracy and treated my own like an inconvenience. That day, in a grocery store parking lot with melted frost forming on my chicken box, I started documenting my own life. That night, I went back to Blue Ridge County Memorial Hospital for my shift. The building smelled like floor cleaner, coffee, and old worry. I checked on Edna Bell in room 214 just after 3 in the morning. Edna was 82, sharp when the sun was up, frightened when the halls went quiet. Her daughter Carolyn tried to come as often as she could, but some nights, Edna woke up convinced everyone had forgotten her. I sat with her for a few minutes after I finished my rounds. She looked at my face and patted the blanket. "Somebody took the shine out of you." I smiled because patients like Edna could find the bruise without being told where to look. "Just family stuff." She nodded like that, explained everything and nothing. People can be kind to everyone in town and still be cruel to the child sitting at their table. I did not answer right away. There was no easy answer to a sentence that true. A few hours later, near the end of my shift, Dr. Margaret Patterson stopped me outside the nurses' station. She was 55, family medicine, community outreach, the kind of doctor who remembered which patients had no ride home and which nurses had worked too many nights in a row. "I heard congratulations are in order," she said. "BSN finally official." "Finally," I said. And for the first time that week, the word did not hurt. She asked if I would consider leading the annual community health fair in October. Blood pressure checks, glucose and A1C screening, cholesterol education, vision screening, dental referrals, a kids' health education tent, the whole thing in the east parking lot if the weather held. "This is not just handing out pamphlets," she said. "It needs someone who can organize volunteers, talk to families, handle paperwork, and keep calm when 3 things go wrong at once. I thought of you." I felt something in my chest loosen and ache at the same time. My own father had looked at my degree and wished it belonged to my sister. My hospital looked at the same work and saw leadership. Dr. Patterson added that Helen Carver, the hospital administrator, was reviewing plans for a community health liaison position later that year. Nothing promised, nothing official. But the health fair would matter. "You don't have to be the loudest person in the room, Maren," she said. "But people should see what you can do." That evening, after I slept 4 hours and woke up with a headache, Jenna texted me a screenshot. It was Brielle's Facebook post from Grace Baptist. She was standing beside Mom in the thrift shop helping fold donated baby clothes, smiling like a daughter in a church brochure. The caption said, "Some daughters don't need a diploma to know how to show up for their mother." I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I took my own screenshot. Jenna called a minute later. "Please tell me you saved that." I did. "Good," she said. "That's not a post. That's evidence." I looked at Brielle's smile on my phone and finally understood the shape of the fight. It was never about who loved my mother more. It was about who got to tell the story first, and Brielle had been telling it for too long. Chapter 3. Recips don't cry. By the end of July, the story Brielle had been telling started reaching places where stories could do real damage. It began with a phone call from my mother on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was sitting in my car outside the hospital trying to decide whether I had enough energy to go inside Food Lion or if peanut butter on toast counted as dinner. Mom sounded distracted. I could hear cabinet doors opening and closing in the background. "Brielle is coming by later to help me with the accounts," she said. "Your father still won't touch anything online since the plant shut down. The household accounts? Just bills, insurance, that sort of thing. She has the laptop and she's here. It's easier." A small warning bell went off in my head. "Mom, did you give Brielle your insurance login?" There was a pause. The kind of pause people use when they know they should not have done something, but want you to sound unreasonable for noticing. Only because she was helping me. "Don't start, Maren." "I'm not starting. I'm asking." "Well, someone has to be here to help." There it was again. Here, the holy word in my mother's vocabulary. 2 days later, I stopped by Cleary Pharmacy after work to pick up Mom's blood pressure refill. Doug Cleary had been behind that counter since I was in high school, a solid man in his early 50s with reading glasses always sliding down his nose and a way of lowering his voice when bad news was coming. He scanned the bottle, frowned, and looked at the screen longer than usual. "Everything okay?" I asked. Doug glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "Her supplemental coverage is showing past due, almost 2 months. If it lapses, this refill could start running full price." I felt my stomach drop, not because I could not pay it, but because Brielle had been standing in church photos being praised for handling everything while my mother's medication coverage was one missed notice away from falling apart. I stepped outside and called the insurance number from my car. I spent nearly 50 minutes on hold, then verifying information, then explaining that Ruth Voss had given account authorization to my sister and that I was trying to prevent a lapse. The woman on the phone was polite in the exhausted way insurance people get polite when they know the system is built to tire you out. By the time I paid the back amount, my lunch break was gone, $412.76. I did not cry. I did not call Brielle. I did not do what I used to do, which was fix the problem and then bury the proof so nobody would feel embarrassed. I forwarded the email confirmation to myself. I saved the PDF. I took a screenshot of the transaction number. Then I texted my mother. Your premium is current now. I paid the back amount today. Please don't let anyone change your insurance without showing you confirmation. She called within 3 minutes. Why would you send me a message like that? Because your coverage was almost 2 months behind. Brielle has been handling things. Then from now on, handling things means showing receipts. My mother went quiet, and for a moment I thought she might understand. Then she sighed. You make everything sound like an accusation. No, Mom, a lapse notice is not an accusation. It's a fact. A week later, Doug called me again. This time, Mom's prescriptions needed prior authorization from a new primary care doctor in Staunton, a doctor she had never seen. I checked the portal that night after my shift and found the change sitting there like a red flag. Someone had updated her primary care physician. Maybe Brielle had clicked the wrong box. Maybe someone at the salon told her a new clinic was better. Maybe she had not understood what changing a PCP meant for refills. Whatever the reason, it was dangerous. I called insurance again, corrected the doctor, wrote down the case number, saved that too. I did not call it fraud. I did not call it elder abuse. I did not turn it into something larger than it was. But I stopped pretending convenience was the same as competence. In August, I stopped by the farmhouse with groceries after a shift. Mom had mentioned Caleb's back was acting up, and I knew they would live on crackers and leftover coffee before either of them admitted they needed help. I was carrying bags through the side door when Mom stepped onto the porch to refill the bird feeder. She grabbed the railing, and the whole thing shifted under her hand. Mom, don't lean on that. She laughed like I was fussing. It's been loose for months. The railing jerked again, and her foot slipped half an inch toward the step. I dropped the grocery bag so fast a tomato rolled across the porch. Caleb came out of the garage wiping his hands on a rag. I'll get to it, he said. Brielle, who had come by with Owen, waved her phone. I already called somebody. It's handled. 2 weeks passed. Nobody came, so I called Russ Decker. Russ was 48, a licensed handyman who did small jobs around the county, and he was also Harold Perkins' son-in-law. He came out the next morning, tested the railing once, and gave me a look I had seen from nurses, checking a bad blood pressure. She could have gone right through this, he said. He replaced the posts, reinforced the brackets, and stained the new wood so it would not look patched. The invoice was $800 even. I paid it. I saved the invoice before Russ left. He asked if he should keep my name out of it. I thought about the old me, the one who would have said yes before he finished asking. You don't need to announce it, I told him, but if anyone asks, tell the truth. 3 days later at Sunday dinner, Mom touched the new railing and smiled. Brielle found the best contractor. Russ happened to be there because he had driven Harold Perkins over after an appointment and stopped to drop off a jar of tomatoes. He looked at me. Brielle looked at him looking at me. I set my fork down. Russ did good work, I said. I'm glad the invoice cleared. My mother froze. Invoice? Brielle's face tightened. I kept my voice even. We can talk later. I'm not hiding safety repairs anymore. Caleb stared at his plate like the pork chops had become fascinating. Mom looked wounded. Not because the porch had almost hurt her, but because I had said the quiet part where other people could hear it. Brielle called me that night. You embarrassed Mom. No. The railing embarrassed everyone who ignored it. You always do this. You swoop in and make people feel stupid. I paid to keep her from falling through a rotten porch. There was silence. Then her voice softened in a way I knew too well. Travis's car insurance is due. He got laid off again, and if the policy cancels, I can't get the kids to school. It's $386. I closed my eyes. Has Travis filed for unemployment? Maren, do you have a payment plan? You have a degree now. You can afford to help family. There it was, dressed as love and holding out its hand. I sent the money because Ainsley and Owen did need to get to school, and because I was not willing to let children pay the price for their parents' chaos. But I sent it through Zelle with a note attached. One-time help for Travis car insurance, AUG, 2024. Then I texted Brielle. This is not a pattern anymore. She did not answer. The next Tuesday I stopped at Harold Perkins' house after work. Harold was 76, a retired mail carrier with type 2 diabetes, a porch full of tomato plants, and a blood pressure cuff he trusted only if I wrapped it around his arm myself. I brought him a bottle of water and a small bag of sugar-free peppermints because he liked to pretend they were medicine. He watched me take his blood pressure and said, "You look like your daddy did when he was studying too hard." I looked up. My father? Harold's eyes flicked toward the window. Back in the day, he used to sit right at my kitchen table with those anatomy flashcards. My hand stilled on the cuff. Anatomy? Harold's mouth closed. He looked suddenly very interested in the tomato plants outside. Old memory, he said. Probably nothing. But it was not nothing. My father had never mentioned anatomy. He had never mentioned school. He had spent my entire adult life treating nursing like something soft, something less real than a hammer or a time clock. And now Harold Perkins had just dropped a match into a room full of dry paper. I did not push him. Not yet. The health fair gave me enough to hold. Dr. Patterson confirmed the date, October 12th, in the east parking lot at Blue Ridge County Memorial Hospital. Helen Carver approved the first round of planning. We had $3,000 from the hospital community fund and $2,000 from a county wellness grant. Augusta Health Outreach Office agreed to loan us automatic blood pressure monitors, an A1C testing kit, and lancets. The Shenandoah Valley Herald said they would send a photographer if we got them the flyer on time. I spent nights after work building volunteer schedules, consent forms, booth layouts, badge lists, and liability paperwork. Tanya Brooks, a 27-year-old nursing student I had once talked out of quitting after a failed clinical exam, signed up for the glucose station and wrote in her email that she wanted to help because I had helped her first. That should have made me happy. Instead, the next thing came from Carolyn Bell. She found me at the pharmacy one afternoon, her purse tucked under her arm, her face careful. Carolyn was Edna Bell's daughter, and she knew me as the nurse who had sat with her mother through those frightened early morning hours. "Maren, I don't want to stir trouble." Those words always meant trouble had already been stirred by somebody else. She told me Brielle had been talking at Grace Baptist, not yelling, not accusing outright, just sighing in that sweet, tired way women use when they want other women to gather around them. Brielle had said I had time for hospital strangers but not my own mother. She had said she was handling the insurance, the bills, the porch, the groceries. She had said it was hard being the only daughter who showed up. I thanked Carolyn for telling me, then sat in my car behind the pharmacy with both hands on the steering wheel. It was not inside the family anymore. Brielle had taken the lie to church. That night I opened my laptop and made a folder, Receipts, Not Revenge. Into it went the insurance confirmation for $412.76, the PCP case number, Russ Decker's $800 invoice, the Zelle note for Travis's car insurance, Brielle's Facebook post, Carolyn's message, Dr. Patterson's email about the health fair. Receipts did not cry. Receipts did not raise their voice. Receipts did not beg anyone to believe them. Receipts waited. My phone buzzed just before midnight. The family group chat lit up with a message from Brielle. Cookout at our place Oct. 12/11/30. Real family makes time. I stared at the date until the numbers sharpened. October 12th, the day of the health fair. Chapter 4. The dream my father Burid Brielle had chosen 11:30 on purpose. The health fair was scheduled from 10 to 2, and anyone who had ever organized a community event knew the middle hour was when everything happened at once. The early arrivals would already be checked in. The blood pressure station would be backed up. The glucose table would need more lancets. Someone would ask where the restrooms were. Someone else would forget a consent form. That was not the hour you slipped away to eat ribs in somebody's backyard and pretend nothing mattered. I stared at the family group chat until the screen dimmed. Brielle had written, "Cookout at our place Oct. 12/11/30. Mom and Dad need help setting up. If you care about family, be there." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could see the trap so clearly it almost looked childish. If I skipped the health fair, I would be proving to Brielle that my work could still be bent around her convenience. If I went to the health fair, she would tell everyone I had chosen strangers over my own mother. Jenna read the message during our break that night and made a sound under her breath. "That's not a cookout," she said. "That's a hostage situation with potato salad." I almost laughed, but my throat was too tight. She knows the time. Of course she knows the time. She's not planning lunch, she's planning a story. So I typed the only answer that did not beg, explain, or apologize. I'm leading the county health fair that day from 10 to 2. I hope you all come by before or after. Brielle replied within a minute. Of course, strangers first. Mom sent, girls don't fight. Dad sent nothing. That silence sat heavier than Brielle's words. At the hospital the next morning, Dr. Patterson found me in the conference room with a stack of volunteer forms, a half-empty coffee, and a floor plan of the east parking lot spread across the table. She studied my face before she looked at the paperwork. Family trouble? Family scheduling, I said. Which is just family trouble with a calendar. She did not press. Dr. Margaret Patterson had a way of giving people room to tell the truth without dragging it out of them. Instead, she slid a folder across the table. Helen Carver asked me to let you know the Community Health Liaison position has moved into formal review. Your internal application is in. The board will look at leadership, outreach experience, patient feedback, and community trust. My hand rested on the folder, but I did not open it right away. So the health fair matters. It matters, she said. But it is not a trick or a test. It is evidence of work you are already doing. I looked down at the parking lot map, at the little squares I had drawn for blood pressure, glucose, vision, dental referrals, kids' education, pharmacy information. For years I had done work that disappeared the moment it helped someone. This was different. This had signs, stations, volunteers, forms, a photographer from the Shenandoah Valley Herald. Dr. Patterson tapped the folder gently. You don't have to be loud to lead, Maren, but you do have to let people see the work. Those words stayed with me longer than I expected. By the first week of October, Brielle had started sharpening her story in public. Carolyn Bell told me after church that Brielle had been standing near the donation bins at Grace Baptist with Janet Morrison and 2 other women, speaking in that soft, tired voice that sounded humble until you noticed where it pointed. I'm not judging her, Brielle had said. It's just hard being the only daughter who shows up. Carolyn had finally answered her. Maren sat with my mother at 3 a.m. last winter. Brielle had smiled. That's her job. Carolyn told me. She looked straight at my sister and said, no, staying after shift wasn't. When Carolyn repeated it to me, I felt something between gratitude and exhaustion. I thanked her, but the thanks felt too small for what she had done. It was one thing for me to know Brielle was lying. It was another thing for someone else to refuse to help her decorate the lie. Still, the story was moving faster than I could catch it. The next Tuesday, I went to Harold Perkins' house before my shift. His tomato plants were dying back for the season, their cages leaning like old men in the wind. Harold sat at his kitchen table, his blood pressure cuff already waiting. As if he had known I would come with questions, I wrapped the cuff around his arm, checked the placement, then looked at him. Was my father trying to become a nurse? Harold did not answer right away. The machine hummed, squeezed, released. He watched the numbers appear like they might rescue him from speaking. Then he sighed. Your daddy was serious about it once. I sat down across from him. How serious? Late 1989, mostly. He kept studying into early 1990, but the dream had started before that. He used to come here after work with anatomy flashcards, biology notes, basic chemistry. Sat right at this table until close to midnight some nights. My father, Caleb Voss, the man who treated my scrubs like a costume and my degree like vanity, had once sat at a kitchen table studying anatomy. Harold rubbed his thumb over the edge of his water glass. He wanted Valley Ridge Community College, nursing program. Said his grandmother Mabel put the idea in his head. I knew the name. Mabel Voss, Dad's grandmother. The one family member he spoke about with something close to reverence. She had been a practical nurse in the Army during the Korean War, tough as fence wire according to him, the kind of woman who could stitch a wound and silence a room. She told him he had good hands, Harold said, not just for fixing things, for caring for people. What happened? He got waitlisted first, then rejected right at the start of 1990. Letter came on a Thursday. I remember because he came over with it folded in his shirt pocket and would not take it out. Your mama had just found out she was pregnant with you, and by spring he had taken the full-time shift at Valley Weave and put the books away. The kitchen felt too small. For years, I had thought my father hated nursing because he thought it was beneath him. Now I understood something worse. He hated it because once it had been above him, out of reach, closed door, rejection letter. And by the time I was born, he had buried that dream so deep he treated anyone who touched it like an enemy. I drove home after Harold's with the windows cracked even though the air had turned cold. In my hall closet, behind old tax records and Christmas ribbons, I found a plastic storage bin of family photos Mom had given me years earlier. I searched until I found one I had forgotten existed. Dad at around 30, sitting at a table with a pencil in his hand. There was a stack of index cards beside him. His face was younger, thinner, but the crease between his eyebrows was mine. The same one I saw in the mirror after reading complicated lab values. I sat on the floor holding that photo for a long time. His pain explained him. It did not excuse him. I was not his rejection letter. I was his daughter. 2 days later, I went to the farmhouse to drop off Mom's updated medication schedule after the primary care mess. Dad was in the garage, sorting through an old toolbox. A yellowed index card slipped from a cardboard box and landed near my shoe, brachial artery. I picked it up before I could stop myself. Dad snatched it from my hand. "You digging through my life now?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. "Why did my diploma make you so angry?" His jaw worked once. "Because you think it makes you better." "No," I said. "You do." For a second, the garage went so quiet I could hear the ticking of the truck engine cooling in the driveway. Dad's face changed, not softening, exactly, but losing its shape. Then he turned away and shoved the card back into the box. I did not follow him. Some doors had to open from the inside. Later that week, I saw Brielle outside the salon in Waynesboro. She was leaning against her minivan, scrolling her phone, her hair perfect and her eyes tired. I had brought Mom's printed medication schedule because Brielle had told Mom she needed a copy if she was going to keep helping. She took the papers and gave me a tight smile. "Making everyone sign for things now?" Receipts make people uncomfortable when the story was built without them. Her face flushed. "You think you're so much better now." "I think Mom needs her medication handled correctly." Brielle looked toward the salon windows, then back at me. "You have no idea what it's like. What is like, being the one who's here. Travis gets laid off every other month. The salon cuts hours whenever business is slow. I don't have letters after my name. I don't have doctors telling me I'm important." Her voice cracked just enough to sound real. "Being here is what I have." For a moment, I saw the fear under the performance. Then she lifted her chin and turned it back into a weapon. "Don't take that too," I left without answering, because pity was not the same as permission. The night before the health fair, I spread everything across my kitchen table. Volunteer badges, clipboards, consent forms, parking lot maps, the folder marked receipts, not revenge. My phone buzzed twice, once with Mom saying she was not sure what time they would get to my event, once with Brielle posting a reminder in the group chat about the cookout. Jenna called while I was packing pens into a canvas tote. What if they don't come? I looked at the forms, the receipts, the work. "Then I'll still show up," I said. "That's what I do. Only this time I'm not disappearing while I do it." The next morning, October 12th, I stood in the east parking lot of Blue Ridge County Memorial Hospital at 7:15, watching white tents rise under the cold blue light of a Shenandoah Valley fall morning. My hands were wrapped around a clipboard. My badge was clipped straight. My folder was in my tote. I did not know whether Brielle would walk into that parking lot, but I knew if her lie came with her, it would not leave intact. Chapter 5. The scanty Sao Wu showed up by 10 o'clock. The east parking lot of Blue Ridge County Memorial Hospital had turned into a small-town version of organized chaos. The white tents snapped in the October wind. Volunteer badges swung from lanyards. Kids dragged parents toward the education table because Tanya Brooks had set out plastic models of lungs and teeth. Jenna was already at the blood pressure station, rolling up sleeves and telling people to uncross their legs. Doug Cleary had a line forming near the pharmacy booth, explaining medication lists to people who had brought paper bags full of pill bottles. I did not have time to think about my family. That was the mercy of work. Real work did not ask if you were heartbroken before it handed you a problem. A box of lancets had been left in the wrong supply bin. One volunteer could not find the consent forms. An older man needed a chair before he fainted in line. A young mother asked whether the dental referral table could help her son even if she did not have insurance. I answered questions, moved chairs, checked station signs, found missing clipboards, and kept walking. Dr. Patterson passed me near the main tent and gave me a quick smile. "You built a good thing here, Maren." I wanted to believe that was enough. Near noon, I looked toward the entrance and saw them. My father came first, shoulders stiff under his brown work jacket. Mom walked beside him, one hand on his arm, looking smaller than she usually did in public. Brielle followed with Ainsley and Owen, her hair curled, her smile already prepared. Travis trailed behind them, holding his phone and looking annoyed. I found out later Travis had forgotten the propane for the grill, and the ribs at Brielle's house were sitting uncooked in a cooler. Mom had also been dizzy for 3 days, so she agreed to stop by for a quick blood pressure check. Dad had only come because he said 10 minutes would not kill him. Jenna saw Mom first. "Ruth, come sit down, let's check you." Mom looked uncertain, like being cared for by people who respected me made her uncomfortable. Jenna wrapped the cuff around her arm and waited for the machine to settle. 152/94, Mom blinked. "Is that bad?" "It's high enough that you need to follow up," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Less sodium, more water. And I want you to stick to the medication schedule I printed. If it stays up, call your primary care office." Mom looked at me differently then, not with pride exactly. More like she had walked into a room in her own house and discovered furniture she had never noticed before. "You really know what all those numbers mean," she said. I almost laughed, but it would have come out wrong. "Yes, Mom. I do." Dad stood behind her with his arms folded. He did not speak. A few minutes later, Dr. Patterson stepped to the front of the main tent to thank the volunteers. People were still moving between stations, so it was not some grand, silent ceremony. It was a practical moment at a community event, a doctor raising her voice enough to be heard over folding chairs and kids asking for stickers. She thanked Jenna at blood pressure, Tanya at glucose and A1C, Doug at pharmacy education, the county representatives, Augusta Health Outreach Office for equipment, and Helen Carver for getting the grant paperwork through. Then she said my name. Maren Voss coordinated this entire event. Volunteer schedules, consent forms, 6 health stations, the county wellness grant equipment, outreach, and follow-up resources for families who usually fall through the cracks. She did this while continuing clinical shifts here at Blue Ridge County Memorial. "This community is better cared for because she kept showing up." The words landed in me slowly. Not because I needed applause. I had lived without it long enough. But because my mother was standing 10 feet away, hearing someone say out loud that the thing she called absence had been work. That was when Brielle spoke. She did not shout. Brielle was too careful for that at first. She stood near Janet Morrison, close to Doug's pharmacy booth, and said with a little laugh, "Funny how she can do all this for strangers, but Mom's bill still landed on me." Doug looked up from a medication chart. "Actually," he said, "Maren paid Ruth's back premium in July. I'm the one who flagged it." Brielle's smile stayed on her face, but the blood left it. "That's private." Doug slid his glasses down his nose. "Then maybe don't lie about it in public." The people nearest the pharmacy booth stopped moving. Janet Morrison looked from Doug to Brielle. Carolyn Bell had been standing near the seating area with her mother's walker folded beside her. She stepped closer, not dramatic, not angry, just steady. "You told us at church she never helps your mother." Brielle lifted her chin. "I said I was handling everything." Russ Decker had just arrived with Harold Perkins, guiding him toward a chair near the main tent. Russ heard that last part and shook his head. "You didn't handle that porch. Maren called me after Ruth almost fell. She paid the $800 invoice." Mom turned to Brielle. "You said you found Russ." Brielle's mouth opened, then closed. "I was going to." That little sentence did more damage than an argument could have. Carolyn's voice was quiet, but it carried. "My mother still talks about Maren sitting with her after shift when she was scared. That wasn't just her job." Tanya stood behind the glucose table, holding a box of strips against her chest. "She kept me from quitting nursing school." It was not a courtroom. There was no judge, no gavel, no dramatic silence from 200 people. A child was still asking for a sticker near the kid's tent. Someone's phone rang near the vision table. But in that small circle near the main tent, the story Brielle had been polishing for months began to crack in public. Brielle looked at me then, and fear turned sharp on her face. "She's making me look bad because she wants everyone to forget she was never there." I set my clipboard down. My hands were steady. That surprised me. "I was never absent," I said. "I was doing the work none of you wanted to see. I paid the premium when it was about to lapse. I fixed the porch before Mom fell through it. I picked up prescriptions after 12-hour shifts. And I'm done letting you call that neglect." Dad's jaw tightened. "Brielle was here." "Yes," I said. "She was here. And I was there, at the pharmacy, at the hospital, on hold with the insurance company, in Mr. Perkins' kitchen, at Mom's porch. You only counted the daughter standing in your doorway." Dad said nothing after that. Helen Carver moved in with the practiced calm of a woman who had run hospital meetings through budget cuts and bad weather. She thanked everyone for their patience and guided people back toward the stations. Dr. Patterson touched my shoulder once, not to stop me, Just to steady the moment, a few minutes later, near the edge of the main tent, Helen spoke to me with Dr. Patterson beside her. The circle was smaller now, but Mom, Dad, and enough people were still close enough to hear. The board completed its review yesterday, Helen said. We'd like you to start as community health liaison in November if you'll accept. For a second, I could not answer. Dr. Patterson smiled. The county already knew who showed up. Today your family heard it too. Janet Morrison looked at Brielle, her face cold with disappointment. Brielle, you let us pray for you over a lie. Travis did not defend her. He shifted Owen onto his hip and muttered that they needed to get back because the cookout was a mess. Brielle looked around, searching for the old room, the old light, the old version of herself where everyone believed her first. It was gone. After the fair ended, after the last blood pressure cuff was packed, and the last folding chair was stacked, Dad stayed behind. He did not look at me for a long time. He just lifted chairs and carried them to the storage cart, one after another, like labor could say what his mouth could not. Finally, he said, Harold told you. I did not pretend not to understand. Yes, he wiped his hands on his jeans, though they were not dirty. Mabel was the best person I knew. Army nurse, tougher than any man in our family. She told me I had the hands for it. His voice broke on the last word, but he swallowed it back. I got waitlisted, then rejected right at the start of 1990. Letter came on a Thursday. Your mother had just found out she was pregnant with you, and I took the factory shift before spring was over. When I saw you with that diploma, I didn't see my daughter like I should have. I saw that letter. I looked at him, this man who had spent decades turning his shame into a weapon and aiming it at me. I can understand that, I said. But I was not your rejection letter, Dad. I was your daughter. He nodded once, like the words hurt, because they were true. I saw you today. You seeing me today doesn't erase the years you chose not to. He did not argue. That was the closest thing to respect he had given me in a long time. The weeks after the fair were quieter than I expected. There was no grand family meeting, no perfect apology, no scene where everyone suddenly understood the years they had taken from me. Real families do not heal like movie endings. They shift by inches, and sometimes the first honest inch is just everyone losing the right to pretend nothing happened. In November, I started as community health liaison. My schedule moved mostly to days, though I kept a few clinical shifts because I was not ready to leave bedside nursing completely. Mom still needed help with insurance sometimes, but now every payment had an email, every change had a confirmation, and every shared folder had my name on it. She started saying thank you in small, awkward places, after an insurance email, after a prescription pickup, after I explained a medication change without letting her pretend Brielle had handled it. It was not enough to erase the years, but it was enough to prove she finally knew there had been years to erase. Brielle still lived 8 minutes away. She was still Ainsley and Owen's mother. She was still loved. But she could no longer stand in a church basement and say she handled everything without someone asking for receipts. A few weeks later, I stopped by the farmhouse and saw my BSN graduation photo on the mantel. Dad had placed it between Ainsley's school picture and Owen's preschool portrait. I did not cry. That diploma did not need a mantle to have value. It had value every time I walked into a patient's room, every time I sat on hold with an insurance company, every time I chose to do the right thing without letting it turn me into a shadow. I did not need my family to clap for me anymore. I only needed them to stop lying about me. And for the first time in my life, if someone asked whether I was the daughter who was never there, I could answer without anger. No. I was the one holding everything together. They just finally looked. If you have ever been the one holding everything together while someone else got the credit, tell me in the comments. Were you really invisible, or were they just refusing to look?